Well, good evening and welcome in to the PressProsMagazine.com Monday Huddle. I'm Bruce Hooley. That gentleman beside me is Sonny Folks. And for the next hour or thereabouts, we'll be previewing the Ohio High School Football State Championship football games coming up this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton. And we may have a word or two or 10 about Ohio State's loss to Michigan and Luke Fickell taking the Wisconsin job. Nobody saw that coming until it was all but done. But let me greet you, Mr. Folks, and congratulate our Press Pros teams who have made it to the state championship. New Bremen in Division 7, Marion Local in Division 6. And yeah, we'll claim Bloom Carroll in Division 3 because they're a Central Ohio team and because they beat Tippecanoe in the regional, in the state semifinals, rather.
Yeah, it was an exciting weekend. There's no question about the anticipation of Marion Local getting through and getting to their what amounts to be now their 16th title game in 22 or 23 years since 2000 with Tim Goodwin as head coach, and that's a remarkable accomplishment, a remarkable figure, and also the fact that New Bremen got there for the second time in 3 years under Chris Schmidt. They had a thrilling. You were there. I mean, you can talk about that more than I did, but everybody I've talked about said, "Wow, what a football game!" You know, when you're down 14-0 and then you score on your next 7 possessions and come from behind and win the way they did. It was one of those things where you were afraid to get up and go to the bathroom because you're going to miss something. So, congratulations to them. Certainly, congratulations to Marion. Congratulations to some other compelling games. We've got some people here ask us tonight from the Reader Speaks about what the best games will be in this week's tournament. But congratulations to my old home community down in Ironton for getting there for a third time in the last 4 or 5 years since we've been going. So. Yeah, there's going to be some interesting matchups there over the weekend, and not the least of which. And I was there Friday night and saw the Springfield Wildcats, folks. If you haven't seen Springfield High School play, if you haven't seen Bryce Schondelmeyer play quarterback, if you haven't seen Anthony Thigpen and some of their receivers at Springfield, go catch the football. They are legit. They're for real. And I got a really good look at them the other night against Moeller High School. I came home and told you, Bruce, that was as good a high school football game as I certainly saw this year because the talent was just everywhere on the field. I went to the sideline Saturday for Ohio State and saw the running back Jordan Marshall from Moeller the night before as a recruit for Ohio State in the end zone there in the pregame watching players warm up. So a lot of talent on the field. Certainly the way that game played out leads you to believe that when you can throw it and catch it the way they can, Springfield's a threat to beat anybody.
Yeah, that's a rematch of last year's game. And of course, the primary difference is Tyshawn Smoot, the quarterback from Springfield a year ago, is now at Jacksonville State. And Bryce Schondelmeyer transferred in from Arcanum. He wanted to get more exposure, bigger stage, play against better competition. He's accomplished all that, and he'll be going up against the defending state champion, Lakewood St. Ed, on Friday night. That's the third game, Friday night, between St. Ed 14-1 and Springfield 13-1. We'll get it all underway on Thursday night. Akron-Hoban 14-1 against Toledo Central Catholic. That'll be for the Division II state championship. And then on Friday, Ironton, who Sonny just mentioned, they're unbeaten. They're going against Canfield South Range. That's a 1 versus 2 matchup from the final AP poll. That's a matchup of two 15-0 teams. And we've got a couple of those in this state tournament. And then the middle game on Friday will be Canfield, who was number 3 in the final poll, against Bloom Carroll. And I guess Bloom Carroll would be the Cinderella team in here. I think they're the only team in the state finals that was not ranked. But after watching them just impose their will on Tip on Friday night and run the ball just up and down the field, 14-play drive, all runs, 99-yard touchdown drive to start the game, somebody missed it when it comes to ranking Bloom Carroll because they're a very good team and very deserving of their berth in the state championship game against Canfield.
Well, I think probably if you go back and look throughout the course of the season, there was a lot of mistakes made in terms of ranking teams. Certainly, I'm going to say this. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and somebody called me about it over 7 seeds that probably didn't belong that high in the final regional pairings. But I thought there were a lot of teams that were a little bit overestimated. As of course, you got to have some of those teams if you're going to have 16 in a region. But I thought it took 4 or 5 weeks to really get down to the contenders this year, the legitimate contenders for this weekend as it plays out, and as the teams that we're going to see in Canton play in the 7 divisions. I don't know if it has to be that way. I guess it has to be that way if you're going to play 16 weeks and you're going to, have a horse at the starting gate for all those divisions. But it really, in 4 or 5 weeks, 4, 5, and 6, the last couple have really gotten down to the teams that when you go out, you say, "Wow, these kids can play." That's what my reaction was. Somebody asked me at halftime the other night about Springfield and Moeller, and because they said, you've been in the MAC all year, you've been looking at Division 5 and 6, and occasionally Division 7. What do you think about this? And the words out of my mouth were "wow," because the speed is in another category compared to what you see in Division 5 and 6, and certainly Bryce Schondemeyer. What a story that is! And I don't mean to make too much of it here and now, but the fact that he had the courage to bet on himself, thinking I could play at a higher on a bigger stage and against that kind of competition and get a chance to play at the very highest place where he's going to get some attention. And some people look at him and say, yeah, he is legit to play in Division I college football. You got to admire somebody. I know there's people who say, well, you grew up in a hometown, you ought to stay there. You abandon the kids you grew up with and played with. But on the other hand, when you get a kid like that who has that much confidence in himself and believes that fervently that he can go and play that level of football, you got to admire somebody who's willing to take that gamble and have it play out.
Well, I mean, he certainly bet on himself, and his family sacrificed a lot to move from Canton to Springfield. They did it the only way you can do it legally. A lot of guys do it illegally, but he did it legally. They moved to Springfield.
Right.
And so he's playing for the Wildcats, and he's got him in the state championship game through a winning touchdown pass in the last 4 minutes against Moeller to get it done. Now, when we get to Saturday, that, of course, is a day that could end as another phenomenal crowning of the Midwest Athletic Conference as the League of Champions. It'll start with Marion Local in Division 6 taking on Kirtland. And no disrespect to all the other 6 championship games there, but that is one that back in August, I think people expected to see the first weekend in December. Kirtland coming up or going down a division rather, from Division 5 to Division 6. The Hornets are playing in their 6th straight state championship game, all since 2011. So they've been a very dominant team here over the last decade plus. Marion Local, of course, last year with a running clock victory over Newark Catholic in the D7 state championship game. That was first thing on Saturday morning, I believe, or maybe Friday morning, now that I think about it. But Marion Local is going for padding its record with a 13th title overall. And the Flyers have been number 1 all season. Kirtland's been number 2 all season. They are 1-2. They are both 15-0. And as I said, this is one that you could have penciled in August. And I don't think you'd have gotten very long odds on it because nobody's surprised to see Marion Local going up against Kirtland. And I think this is the 4th time they will have played for a state championship, Marion Local and Kirtland against each other.
This is the 4th time, and Kirtland leads the series 2-1. They won in 15, lost in 17, and won again in 19, I think. And I don't even know how to handicap this particular game. I went back over the weekend and just look at comparative schedules, and even that's really hard to look at and try to come up with anything. So they both had some games that were wide open, that were mismatches in terms of competition in the regular season. And games that they were both challenged. And I would say when you talk about Marion's biggest challenge in the league this year would be from Versailles and New Bremen. Certainly the way the Coldwater game played out, it wasn't that much of a challenge. And maybe their best challenge of the year came on opening night against Division III Wapakoneta when they beat them 21-7 and beat them comfortably 21-7. So, Marion has proven to be a team over the years that is so well prepared that they can go out and make adjustments on the fly during a game and do what they have to do to put themselves in a position to win. And I dare say that Tiger Laverty and the team that the culture of football that he has now at Kirtland is almost a mirror image of what Marion Local is capable of doing. You don't win 6 titles like Kirtland has done. You don't win 12 in 15 tries like Marion has done without having that kind of culture of football.
Yeah, here's some numbers. Marion Local has given up 33 points all season. 33 points all season.
And
They had 11 shutouts. They have given up 3 points in their last 9 weeks. 3 points in their last 9 weeks. Kirtland also very accomplished defensively. They have 6 shutouts on the season. And in the last 8 weeks, they have given up 20 points. 8 weeks, 20 points. That includes, obviously, 5 weeks of playoffs. So both teams are playing extremely well. It appears, although they may be moved to have to do something that they have not had to do in order to get to the state championship game, that both teams are going to rely on the run. Kirtland had 556 rushing yards in its state semifinal victory. They had a back, Tommy Gogoli, and he was going and going because he has the word go in his name twice. 363 yards on 18 carries, Sonny. My West Liberty Salem High School math tells me that's just a skosh over 20 yards per carry.
I think it also illustrates not only how good they are individually and how good they are as a culture of football. I think it also shows a little bit of a disparity. Fort Fry is a good team. In Southeast Ohio and Washington County, down along the river there, they are a giant. We saw them beat St. Henry last year, and certainly an impressive culture of football there. And those people are quite proud, and justly so, of what Beverly Fort Fry has been able to do. But look, when you take somebody like Kirtland and you move them down south and play a team like that, and you look at the difference, first of all, the difference in size, and I'm sure Kirtland is a much bigger, stronger, faster team than what Kirtland is depth-wise. I'm sure that's not there's no comparison there. It just shows you the dominance of programs like Kirtland, like Coldwater, like Marion. If you want to go into some other divisions, like a St. Ed's, I think a lot of people are thinking right now that a bygone conclusion that St. Ed's is going to go in and beat Springfield again. I wouldn't argue against that, but I will argue against the summation that Springfield is not going to go down without a fight because they're capable. They're capable of throwing the ball 50, 60 yards down the field and outrunning defenders to go get it. I saw that the other night because Moeller is a very, very good football team. They've got athletes at all 11 positions on the field. And yet, Springfield is capable of getting guys free, getting them open in the secondary, and Bryce Schondelmeyer put it right on their hands. So, a lot of these games, somebody wrote here and asked me earlier this afternoon, what are the best games going to be this weekend? All of them. I really believe that, all of them.
Yeah, they're all great matchups. We're looking forward to the Division 6 game, of course. The Division 7 game, which we have not talked about yet, is a rematch of 2 years ago. New Bremen, which came from behind both against Ansonia, the top seed in its region, and against Lima Central Catholic in the state semifinals on Saturday night. New Bremen, 12-3. Number 7 in the final AP poll in Division 7 will take on Warren JFK. JFK was number 1 all season long. JFK's 13-1, but that's the team that New Bremen beat for the state title 2 years ago. And Lima Central Catholic is the team that New Bremen beat in the state semifinals 2 years ago to get to Canton. So this feels like a very familiar scenario for New Bremen. New Bremen and Marion Local making it to the state title game, as you can see on the crawl, makes this 13 of the last 14 years. At least one MAC team has reached the state championship game. The MAC has won a state football title 12 of the last 13 years. We can update that after the games of this weekend, of course. MAC teams are 19-8 in championship games over that span. And we will see if New Bremen and or Marion Local can add to that total this weekend.
I can tell you this from the 20 game that people in Trumbull County really felt like Warren JFK was just bigger, stronger, and would dominate the line of scrimmage. As it turned out, they were bigger. I don't know that they were stronger, but they were certainly not as athletic. And I kind of have the feeling that they may not be as athletic again as what the depth of athletes as what New Bremen is. Now, I don't know until I get there. And again, I have not seen Warren JFK play, but I do have contacts in Trumbull County, in that area of the state, and there's no comparison in strength of schedule. New Bremen to what they played throughout the season, and probably what Warren JFK played in their league. But when it comes down to it on Saturday, I don't expect to see too much of a difference in the team that New Bremen puts out there than the one they put out in 2020. They've got the same Mitchell Hayes kind of quarterback that can beat you with his legs or beat you with his arm. They've got guys that can run and get it if you want to throw it. And they've certainly got the same running back that scorched JFK in 2020 with a 100-yard day that day, and Hunter Schaefer. He is, if nothing else, bigger, faster, and a little stronger than he was then. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup. And, of course, I love these compelling rematches of teams that played 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And they know each other very well. They've got a book on each other, and they've had a year or more to sit around there and say, here's what we did wrong. We're not going to do this again.
We are sponsored during our weekly update shows called The Lowdown by our friends at Lehman's Hardware and Old Time General Store. And we've been telling you all season long to build in time on your trip from Western Ohio to the state football championship games to get out, stretch your legs, and have lunch at Lehman's Hardware. It is 4 miles off Route 30 on Kidron Road. Perfect place to stop, grab a bite to eat, browse their vast inventory. And we have tonight to give away at least one, and maybe more than one, $50 Lehman's gift card, which we will do our best to get in your hands before you go up there. But I only want to do it if you're going, and you're going to have to ask us a really good question or make a really good observation via Facebook or our other live stream platforms. So if you do that and we are prompted to say, well, that's a really good question, you just might end up with a $50 Lehman's gift card to spend at Lehman's this weekend when you're on your way to the state football championships.
Fabulous store. In fact, you might miss a gift or two. You might get stuck in the store.
You might. You very well might.
It is a place you want to go see. Experience.
We talked about the Marion game. We talked about the New Bremen game. We did not talk about the final game of the weekend, which will be the Saturday night nightcap. 15-0 Cincinnati, Wyoming against 14-0 Glenville. That is another matchup of unbeatens and another matchup of 1 versus 2 in the regular season. Glenville won its state semifinal 52-7. 52-7. Glenville has pretty much rolled over the last 10 weeks or so on its schedule. And Glenville is one of those teams that has a lot of reputation and as many state championships in football as I have, 0. So Glenville is going for its first state championship in football. All those Ohio State Buckeyes over the years, all those NFL players over the years, Heisman Trophy winners over the years, no state titles. So we'll see if Glenville can get that done. Massillon, Washington, same reputation, probably a more elevated reputation. No state titles, and Washington came up empty again this year. It beat St. Ed's in the regular season, but it could not beat Hoban in the regionals. So there you go. We'll see if Glenville can get it done against Cincinnati, Wyoming. That one should be a good one as well. I don't see a matchup here that I look at and say, wow, that's a lopsided matchup. They all look pretty good.
No. Again, to the guy who wrote to me and said, who's the best games this weekend? They're all good. They're all good. Just some of them maybe are probably more interesting than others because of proprietary interest in your own home school district or something like that. But I can't remember a weekend where you've got 7 games that, at least on paper, look to be as good as what these are.
All right, so get your entries in for the Lehman's gift card. Just ask us a question on Facebook. We'll make an executive decision on whether it is a gift card worthy question or not. Any question you have about any of the teams that we cover, that would be New Bremen, that'd be Marion Local, Bloom Carroll a little bit, and obviously we know a little bit about Springfield because Sonny covered them Friday night. Moving to Saturday, Mr. Folks, you were in Ohio Stadium.
Very close to it.
Yes, for what was a surprising result in that at halftime, it looked like we'd have at least a competitive game. I did not think if only one of the teams in that game scored 3 points in the second half, that team would be Ohio State, but that is how it turned out. Michigan pulled away to a 45-23 loss, which prompted, after the game, trending on Twitter, the hashtag Fire Ryan Day.
Mm-hmm.
Fire Ryan Day. They're undefeated this season except for one game. They've been in the playoff, both of Ryan Day's seasons? Has he been there 3 years? He's been there with Justin Fields 2 years and CJ Stroud 2 years. So he's been in the playoffs 2 of the 3 years he's been a head coach. I wouldn't rule him out of getting in the playoff this year. TCU has to lose. USC has to lose. One of the two has to lose, and I think Ohio State could sneak back in. But I think everybody knew that if Ohio State didn't get to the playoff this year, the season would be a failure. But the season can be a failure, and you can not think that it'd be a good idea to fire Ryan Day after a loss like that.
You know, when that game, there are so many other considerations surrounding that game about Heisman, about Stroud. Is he coming back? Well, he's gone. Who's coming back? If they play in the Rose Bowl or they play, who's going to set out a game? You know, if they don't get into the playoffs and they go, you know, like last year. Well, Ryan Day, Jim Knowles. The drama surrounding Ohio State really takes a lot away from Ohio State football, for the fact of just going, appreciating the environment, the atmosphere, and just the skill level of the players that were out there. Now, it's always been that way. This is nothing new. But, you know, honestly, you wonder if that many people in Ohio have anything else to complain about in life more than Ohio State losing a football game. It's just a little, your perspective, it makes you scratch your head. You know, I've always said, you know, about Ohio, where somebody asked me about Ohio State football, if I'm a big fan, I said, you know, if my life's ever on the line and I'm on the operating table at the James, before they put me under, I don't want to look up and see an Ohio State football player. I want to see the best surgeon in the world. I don't want to look up, you know, and see Eddie George. I want to see the best surgeon in the world. I care more about that relative to Ohio State. But honestly, when I looked out there Saturday, and somebody wrote here, I'm going to pull it up right now. You weren't there, but in your opinion, Tom from Columbus wrote and said, what's the biggest factor in Ohio State in getting blown out by Michigan in the second half? It's a little hard to say that they didn't get out coached.
Well, I'm not a believer in the whole out coach thing.
Well, but here, they took a lot of risks. They did a lot of things on defense that got them burned. You don't usually see teams in that kind of situation get beat 5 times down the field on big plays like they did, especially the 2 touchdowns to Cornelius Johnson in the first half. I mean, those were just wide open plays where, you know, they get behind the secondary because, you know, they blitz, they rush, they sell out to get to the quarterback, and you better get there. Well, that's Jim Knowles' defense, and that didn't work out. So, you know, did it get out coached? Well, that didn't work for him. The second thing that I think you got to do in a game like that, if you're up 20-17 at halftime, Bruce, you got to run the ball with dominance in the second half, shorten the game, keep the other team's offense off the field. And I never did this year get the feeling like Ohio State was a strong running team, a dink and duck team trying to get the ball in the hands of those receivers. CJ Stroud, wonderful, great throw of the football. But I think you got to prove that you're the strongest team on the field, and they didn't do that on Saturday.
Well, as for the coaching aspect of it, I don't think coaches get dumber. I do think Ryan Day is a really good offensive coach, and I think his weakness, if he has one, is that his specialty is scheming the passing game, and that's his default when he gets in trouble, is to throw the ball. Now, they have injuries at the running back position. We all know that. But I think that's a little bit of a thin excuse, given that Dallin Hayden had a big game against Maryland the week before, and they didn't really try him against Michigan.
He didn't play.
It's not that, they tried him and the moment was too big for him. They really didn't try him. So I think there I'll give you a little bit of the coaching nod. However, as for Jim Knowles, that's the defense he brought with him from Oklahoma State. That's the defense he was told that they wanted to have, a defense that dictates to the opponent, that takes big risks, that causes chunk plays and turnovers and sudden change and all that. And here's the deal. When you play in the Big Ten and the only opponent that you can possibly get exposed by is Michigan and occasionally Penn State, you get away with mistakes against the Marylands, the Purdues, the Indianas. You get away with mistakes. I will give you a play Saturday. There's two plays in my 20 years covering Ohio State football that really stood out to me as gut punch plays to the Buckeyes because it was something they'd never seen before. First play is the Fiesta Bowl 2007 national championship game, Troy Smith against Florida. He goes back to pass. Defensive end from Florida comes in off the edge. Troy Smith ducks in under him, stands there, pats the ball 2 or 3 times. Bam! He goes down from behind. The end ran by him, had the speed and the recovery to get back and knock him down. And I will never forget Troy getting up, looking at him, and you could almost see like a bubble over Troy's head saying, that never happens in the Big Ten. No, it didn't ever happen in the Big Ten. But Jarvis Moss made it happen that night, and he made it happen over and over and over and over again. Saturday, Ohio State sells out on a blitz. I don't remember when it was, but it's the play along the left sideline to Cornelius Johnson.
Second quarter.
J.J. McCarthy throws the ball. He beats the blitz, throws to his hot receiver. The guy's where he's supposed to be. He makes the catch. He makes a cut, spins away from a tackle, and goes the distance. Not many teams in the Big Ten can make that play at quarterback and at wide receiver. But Michigan can make that play. And when you don't face that kind of an opponent all year, and you can only play who you play, but when you don't face that all year, the stakes become very high for getting exposed in that kind of a situation. Notre Dame was not able to expose it. Big Ten teams were not able to expose it. And that's the difference between playing in the SEC and playing in the Big Ten. In the SEC, if you have an off day like Michigan had against Illinois or Ohio State has against Maryland, you get beat. Mississippi will beat you. Mississippi State will beat you. Somebody will beat you if you have an off day like that in the SEC. In the Big Ten, you can have an off day, as both Ohio State and Michigan did the week before, and you can get away with it. But Saturday, Ohio State had an off second half, and they didn't get away with it.
I had assumed all year that's why they beefed up their schedule with Arkansas State this year, was to try to get some more experience against that kind of competition. It didn't work out that way.
No, it did not. So Ryan Day, I don't think you wouldn't be on my hot seat, Ryan, if I had one. But
or mine.
Apparently, Ohio State fans are down on you, and it would serve them right if you left for an NFL job, and they would then rue your leaving. But I doubt that he will do that because he probably doesn't want to leave this way. But this is the thing, Ohio State fans, when you bellyache and whine and complain as if you're entitled to a playoff berth every year, you make the job an impossible job to enjoy. And I think Ryan Day's got a young family, and he might be thinking to himself, I wouldn't blame him if he was, what am I doing here? Where if I'm anything less than perfect, I'm trash. Or I can go to the NFL, and if I'm 10-6, I'm in the tournament and I can win it all. I'm just telling you, the more you react the way you reacted to Saturday, this is a rivalry, folks. If you're going to win it every year, guess what it ceases to be? A rivalry. This was not a rivalry when Michigan was beating Ohio State every year under John Cooper. It was not a rivalry when Tressel and Meyer were dominating Michigan. It's only a rivalry if you have the chance that you can lose the game. And so this had to happen for it to retain the special nature that people claim they love about the Ohio State-Michigan game. Well, the pain every now and then is part of it. And if you're not going to have any pain in a series, then that's what you have, is a series and not a rivalry.
One of the things that I enjoy the most about traveling in the spring with the baseball team, when we go to Michigan, when you go to Fisher Stadium and talk to some of the veteran ushers there, those guys have been there a long time. They know Michigan sports history inside and out. And you ask them about that rivalry. You ask him about the series over the last 15 years when Ohio State was just mopping the floor in every conceivable way. It wasn't a rivalry. It was just as
It
you
was
said,
another game. It was embarrassing when Rich Rodriguez was there. It was
embarrassing.
embarrassing when Brady
Yeah.
Hoke was there.
But and you know the arrogance that builds up over a period of time like that when you beat a team like Michigan. And I remember a couple years ago, prior to last year's game, being up there with Ohio State baseball and talking to one of the gentlemen who was an usher in Fisher Stadium at the baseball weekend. And I asked him that very question. And all he said to me, smiled, and he said, "The worm will turn." He said, "I've watched this series for 40 years." He said, "It's going to change. It's going to turn." And he said, and when it does, he said, it'll be the same in Ohio that it's been here. And he said, quite frankly, in Michigan, a little bit, that, you know, for several years, they've lost to Michigan State. And that's been a big embarrassment for them within the state of Michigan. It isn't like, it'd be like Ohio State losing to Ohio University. And that's what's happened up there. So that the polish is a little bit maybe off of that rivalry from the sake of their interest. Because right now, for that period of time, they were struggling to beat Michigan State. But the man said, "Hey, the worm will turn." He said, "There's too many good athletes here." And he said, "It's unusual to go lose 9 out of 10 or whatever the number was to them, given the history of the tournament or given the history of the rivalry." But he said, it'll come around. He'll come around, and he says, then they'll have the same suffering in Ohio that they've had here. And, you know, for 2 years now in a row, that's what we've experienced this weekend. It's amazing.
So what are Ohio State's chances for the playoff? USC plays Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. Utah is the only team to beat USC this year. That is a game that Utah could win again because USC has a very porous defense. But I would anticipate that knowing they'll get in the playoff if they win the game, USC will win it. TCU, I've not seen anything of TCU this year. They play Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game. If TCU and USC win and Georgia wins the SEC title game and Michigan beats Purdue, then those will be your 4, and Ohio State be on the outside looking in. And Ohio State against, I would guess, Oregon would probably be the team they would play in the Rose Bowl. I don't think Utah would get back in, but we'll see. You know, would there be a way that Ohio State and Alabama could play in a bowl game? I'm never going to say never because these deals are brokered, but I would think the Rose Bowl would be loath to give up Ohio State. I think they'd want to get Ohio State if they could. The Rose Bowl typically likes to have the highest ranked game that they can get. So if USC would beat Utah, Utah would drop below Oregon. So I would think it would be Ohio State against Oregon in the Rose Bowl if USC beats Ohio State, if USC beats Utah.
Let me ask you this. In your opinion, which of those matchups benefits Ohio State the most in the long term?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that a team with a good offense can score on Ohio State. And so I think Ohio State has a very good offense. Now, who's going to play in that game for Ohio State? You know, I would not anticipate that C.J. Stroud would play in it. I would not anticipate that Paris Johnson or DeJuan Jones would play in it. Defensively, Zach Harrison maybe play, maybe not. I mean, anybody that's got the idea of going to the NFL, I could see them sitting that game out. Chris Olave did. Garrett Wilson did. It didn't hurt either one of them in the draft. So I would think the situation has been created by which a C.J. Stroud, who's certainly in the running for, if not the top pick in the draft, the top 5 pick in the draft, to play in a Rose Bowl, I don't know that that would be a risk worth taking if you're C.J. Stroud. And I'm not saying I agree with that. I think when you agree to play for a team, you play all the way until they're not playing more games.
Well,
that has become a regrettable trend. And I would not anticipate that any players would sit that out. You say, well, you know, they're lost to Michigan. They don't want to end that with that in their mouth. Well, that was in their mouth last year and they sat out. So, you know, I would not anticipate that C.J. Stroud, a couple of his linemen would be out there, and maybe not Zach Harrison either in a Rose Bowl game.
Well, going back to what we were talking about 5 minutes ago about you don't get the kind of competition in the Big Ten across the gamut of the schedule to prepare you for teams like Michigan on a one-and-done day. I would think that whoever they play in a postseason game, they need to play the absolute best athletes they can play to to get a little bit of that kind of experience going forward into next year, for one, kind of get the funk out of their head, two, or put some good juju in their head about confidence against a ranked opponent like that, whether it's Alabama or whoever it is, Southern Cal, it doesn't matter. But you know, again, going back to, and you made a very good point a few minutes ago when you said you just don't get to a point where you can beat rats when you play mice all year. Yep. And you know, that's the situation when you're playing Wisconsin. We were at Wisconsin this year. They lambasted them. They were competitive. Northwestern was surprisingly close, and Northwestern didn't beat anybody this year. So, you know, you make a very good point, and I think whoever they play, they need to play somebody who is a real threat to go out there and beat them and expose some of the things that they need to beef up on both sides of the ball. And one of the things, and I go back to this, I've said this for 2 or 3 years, they're not a team that's convinced me anymore that they are a power running team. And if they need to get 3 yards in a cloud of dust, they can do it.
Well, speaking of competition in the Big Ten, I would anticipate that Wisconsin's program would be getting better in the coming years because they surprisingly hired Luke Fickell away from Cincinnati on Sunday. I don't think anybody saw this coming. Luke's name had been mentioned a lot in the past. I think he kind of fell off the radar, not because Cincinnati had a bad year, but they weren't 13-0 and playoff worthy this year like they were a year ago. But Luke Fickell took the Wisconsin job, and a lot of Ohio State people were very surprised at this because I think they all thought that Luke Fickell would stay in Cincinnati until Ryan Day left Ohio State, and Luke Fickell would be the conquering hero coming back to where he played. He's a Columbus kid, but I'm not the least bit surprised that Luke Fickell took the Wisconsin job. I think it totally fits him, the kind of guy he is, the kind of family man he is. And my perception of Luke, and I know some people who know him pretty well, is that he wants the resources to win a national championship, but he does not want to have the season, every season, graded on a pass-fail basis. And that's the way it is at Ohio State. You either pass, get to the playoffs, maybe win the national title, or you fail. And that will not be the case at Wisconsin. Luke Fickell can have a 10-3 season at Wisconsin, and the Badger fans will be over the moon for it. And I think he will get Wisconsin into the playoff eventually. And he doesn't seem to me to be a job-hopping kind of a guy. So I think the ship has sailed on Luke Fickell coming to Ohio State. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for his wife and for their kids. And I think they'll build a great life in Wisconsin because I think he got $8 or $9 million a year to succeed Paul Chryst at Wisconsin. And I would be very surprised. You're never sure because I thought Scott Frost would be a great hire at Nebraska. But I would be very surprised if Luke Fickell is not a very, very good hire at Wisconsin.
Well, I'd be very, very surprised if he does not recruit Ohio very well for Wisconsin.
Yeah, he does. He does now for Cincinnati.
He does now for Cincinnati. And I think the price of poker just got a lot more expensive for Ryan Day and Ohio State as far as that relationship with high school coaches in the state of Ohio, where that you go into a home knowing you've got a 75% chance of getting that kid to come to Columbus just because you're Ohio State and the culture of Ohio State football across the 88 counties in the state. So that part of it is a big old hurt or an ouch for Buckeye football fans when you consider that the kid who automatically would have gone to Ohio State had he had the opportunity in the past may look at a very well-known and very well-respected Luke Fickell now at Wisconsin and say, this is an equally great opportunity for me. Excuse me. And I have no problem with leaving the state and going and playing at Wisconsin for Luke Fickell.
Well, so, now you get the chance to play. You know, it's one thing to say you can play at Cincinnati and we'll try to get in the playoff and you're close to your parents in Columbus or you're close to your parents in the state of Ohio. Now you can say we're going to play in Ohio Stadium. You're going to get the chance to go play against a team that did not want you. We want you. You look at an Ohio State recruiting class, it is inundated with out-of-state kids. They have seeded about, I would say, 10 to 12 kids a year that would have been signees under Jim Tressel to other schools. And eventually, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when one of those kids is going to come back and do a Ryan Brewer to you. You know, Ryan Brewer did it as a South Carolina Gamecock in the Hall of Fame Bowl. And Lee, I can't remember his name, from Wisconsin did it to him in 2003 up there. A kid from Cleveland who played wide receiver for Wisconsin. I can't remember his last name. But Luke Fickell is going to pull kids out of Ohio now.
No question.
Who are legit Big Ten players who will love and be motivated to go into Ohio Stadium and beat Ohio State. That is what I thought Jim Harbaugh would do at Michigan. I thought Jim Harbaugh would go back to the ways of his mentor, Bo Schembechler, who always did very well in the state of Ohio with outstanding players like Ed Shuttlesworth and Denny Franklin and I can't think of a couple other backs, but obviously Michigan men, you talk about Desmond Howard and Charles Woodson, those are both Northeast Ohio guys.
Yeah.
So, Harbaugh has not really done that. Luke Fickell is going to do that, and you are going to see kids who are playing this coming weekend at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium in the very near future as Wisconsin commits. That I will guarantee you.
And there's not that much difference in a 3-star and a 5-star. The biggest difference is the 3-star may be a late bloomer because at 17, 18 years old, it's hard really to guess what a kid's going to be like when he's 20 or 21. Well, now that kid's going to go to Wisconsin if he's a 4-star or 3-star or 4-star recruit, and he's going to get immediate playing time. He's going to get more reps. He's going to get an opportunity there for responsibility earlier than he would have maybe at a Michigan or Ohio State. And some of those kids are going to develop quickly, and they're going to mature, and they're going to become a 5-star athlete by the time they're a junior and draft eligible. So, that's what he's going to get. He's going to get a lot of those tweeners that are going to go up there and blossom very quickly at Wisconsin.
All right, let's get back to our Division 6 and Division 7 teams, and let's talk a little bit more about New Bremen and against Warren JFK. They play in the Saturday middle game at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium. You told me early in the year that New Bremen was good enough to get to the state championship game.
1 of 2.
And I thought you were a little off the reservation. Now, I had not seen him play yet. You have been raving about David Homan as a quarterback for the last 2 years. And I have now had the chance to watch New Bremen twice. And I now see what you saw. But the thing I really see about New Bremen, when you would talk to me about New Bremen, you would talk about David Homan and you would talk about Hunter Schaefer. But I never heard you talk about Aaron Thiemann. I never heard you talk about Ben Saylor. Those two wide receivers made some tremendous catches in the game on Saturday night against Lima Central Catholic on plays that had to be made, third down drive sustaining plays. You mentioned earlier that New Bremen scored on 7 consecutive possessions, six touchdowns and a field goal. And that doesn't happen without the plays by their wide receivers and, of course, the throws by David Homan. But man, oh man, New Bremen's offense must be a bear to deal with because they had no margin for error in their regional game against Ansonia, a game played in the snow at Greenville. They had to respond every single time they had it against Ansonia, and they did. Game-winning drive at the end. And they had to respond against Lima Central Catholic because Carson Parker, Lima Central Catholic's junior quarterback, boy, is that kid a player. Mm-hmm. So somebody needs to take a look at him. He is a definite Division I prospect as just a junior at Lima Central Catholic. But tell me what you saw back then in the New Bremen Cardinals that led you to be a prophet in saying that they were state championship game worthy.
Well, first of all, you thought I was smoking some bad Jimson weed. That's what I saw, that look in your eye.
I mean, I figured I know the MAC is deep, but I thought at that point, we thought we had Marion and Coldwater, Versailles, and I just thought New Bremen, I'm not sure if this is their year.
An outlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, I went back and I said, I think there's 2 teams that are going to be where New Bremen is. New Bremen or Fort Laramie. I felt
you did. That's right.
Equally strong about both of those teams. And I think the injury bug kind of crept in throughout the season on Laramie, maybe more than it did with New Bremen. You mentioned Aaron Thiemann and Ben Saylor. Early in the year, they weren't the kind of players they were Saturday night when you saw them.
Mm-hmm.
There's two prime examples, and Chris Schmidt told me this over the course of the summer. He said, now, we lost 16 seniors last year. We got 16 juniors coming back this year that played last year, but they need more time to develop, mature, and become the kind of impact players that the likes of which we have lost the last 2 years. And he said, as these players, I'm confident. I remember him telling me, I am confident that these guys like Saylor and Tiemann are going to get this chance to play, and they're going to become that kind of player. Ben Saylor wasn't that kind of player, and when I saw him week 3 or week 4 against Versailles, but you could see him out there. You saw the speed, you saw his instincts, his reactiveness. He just needed to play, and over the course of that last 8 weeks, he has become that kind of player. Yeah, I saw 2 or 3 weeks ago when I saw them play the last time in person that I saw, he was making plays, getting free in the secondary, commanding the ball. Quite frankly, I'm out here. All you got to do is get me the ball, and I'm going to make the play for you. So, yeah, that's what I saw, was just that athleticism. And in the back of my mind, and I believe when these coaches tell me this is a kid that all he needs is PT, playing time. And the rest of it's going to just happen for him because he's that good of an athlete, and he's playing around good kids. David Holman makes everybody on that field better. He's the guy in the huddle that everybody respects, and they don't want to let him down. And that, as much as anything, explains why New Bremen is going to be in the title game Saturday against Warren JFK.
Yeah, I call David Holman the Pied Piper because, man, those guys will follow David Holman anywhere. They believe in him, and they should believe in him. He makes big throws. He makes big runs. He blocked an extra point. That kid just does everything for New Bremen, and I understand why his teammates believe in him so much. Let's switch to Marion Local. They have been, as we said, dominant all year. Tate Hess, a new quarterback this year. Peyton Oddie last year got it done. Now Kyle Oddie, who had a devastating knee injury a year ago, has been running the ball very, very well. Marion has shown in the last couple weeks that they can throw it when they want to. They got Darren Meyer, their kind of acknowledged best player back. The strength of their team defensively are their linebackers. You kind of had a thought that maybe their margin on Saturday night was, do I want to say intentionally kept in check, as Coach Goodwin maybe played it a little bit close to the vest, not wanting to show anything more than he absolutely positively needed to Kirtland?
I've seen him play so much that there were a lot of things that I was waiting to see Saturday night that I just never did see. And there's no question when you're in a game like that and the team from up north is playing at Fort Fry and are going to have their way and run for 556 yards, there's no question that you don't want to show too much. Now, maybe I've got that totally wrong. And if he was sitting here in the room with me and he said, well, you don't know what you're talking about, fine. But, they're out there against a team that are geared to stop the run, and they're trying to run the ball. And frankly, it was pretty smash mouth football for both ways for the first 20 minutes of the game. It didn't get until like 4 minutes before halftime when they threw that little pass, screens, whatever you want to call it, to Kyle Oddie in the flat and let him weave his way through the secondary. That's the first wrinkle that they showed throughout the game. Up until then, it was student body left, student body right, and Drew Louse or sights right up the middle. And against that, Columbus Grove was capable of holding their own because that's what they played. That's what they did. By the way, they weren't able to run right at Marion and do enough. And when they tried to get to the boundary, the pursuit of Marion's linebackers is just too good. And I would imagine that probably Kirtland sees that on film and they're going to say, we're going to test you. We're going to test you tackle to tackle and see how you stop this. But there's no question in my mind, like I said earlier, that he is one of the smartest, best at making changes on the fly, adjustments at halftime, and taking advantage of whatever opportunity the other team gives him. He just didn't show a lot of that the other night. You did see Tate Hess one time extend the passing game, extend the field, and he hit Nate Busher on a 71-yard play on a contested catch. Great catch right over the head of the defender on the sideline, gather himself and run into the end zone. That's the one time that he showed you any fire and lightning the other night. The rest of the time, it was pretty much we're gonna button it down. We're gonna make you tackle us. We're gonna work the clock. We're gonna get out of here and go home and get ready for next week.
So Darren Meyer did not play 2 weeks ago in their 55-0 win over Allen East, and you saw him Saturday night. Were they babying him through the game, or was he, to all appearances, 100%? Did they use him as much in the running game as you would anticipate they would use him? They have a lot of options in the running game, so you're never quite sure which running back.
I don't remember him playing until he slipped in the second quarter and carried the ball a couple of times, and then he got a couple stops on defense. And I asked him about it after the game, and he smiled and he said, no, he said he feels great.
Okay.
He feels great. And he said he's certainly going to play a lot next week. But he said, we were just giving him an opportunity, a bruised shoulder, to get that thing feeling as well as it possibly could and get him back to 100%. He said he wants to play. He feels great. And when he ran the ball the other night, he ran like Darren Meyer, because there was a couple of times when he hit that gap between guard and center and met the linebacker head on, and after contact, he dragged him 6 or 7 yards downfield. That is vintage Marion football. That's vintage Darren Meyer football. He showed no ill effects the other night, or no tentativeness about carrying the ball or getting hit or hitting somebody.
Well, I think you're right. I think this will be a test for Marion local between the tackles first. That's where Kirtland's probably going to try to take advantage of what we presume will be a size advantage up front. You concur with that? I presume that Kirtland, coming from Division 5, would have bigger kids, although Marion's kids are legendarily large, would have bigger kids across the front than Marion typically has. Accurate or inaccurate?
I think accurate, but I saw in 2017 when Marion beat them 34-11, I think it was 17, when they beat them 34-11, they were much bigger across the front than what Marion was that day, and Marion whipped them soundly. They were just more athletic. They were more precise in their blocking, holding those blocks, giving that runner coming through that hole an extra step or so to maneuver and find his way to the next level. That's the kind of thing that Marion does so well. And yeah, I agree with you. They're going to test them tackle to tackle, and it'll be a game of wills for the first 12 or 15 minutes. And I don't know if I keep going back to last year, comparing this team to last year. You and I said last year and said, what if they have to throw the ball?
Mm-hmm.
Because Peyton Ottey was not a great thrower of the ball. He was athletic enough to get it downfield and get it near a receiver. And suddenly come out there against Newark Catholic when Newark Catholic was selling out to stop the run. Okay, you do that on a couple series, we're going to throw it right down the pipe on you. And they did. Mm-hmm. And he hit those receivers like Brady Ronnebaum and people like that right on the hands. And the other night I saw Tate Hess and do that when he hit that pass to Busher down the sideline. That was a very tough throw to make over the head of the receiver who had good position, and he hit Busher right in the hands. He caught it on a contested catch, turned, gathered himself, kept himself in bounds, and made an athletic play to get into the end zone. So they can throw the ball. They haven't done it a lot. They don't need to or haven't needed to, but certainly in the back of their mind, I think they're confident. If we need to, he's confident in Tate Hess's ability to throw the ball.
And before we get out of here tonight, we want to mention and congratulate Tippecanoe on a great season. They did run into a team that was just so much bigger than they were across the front. It's one thing when you're giving up 20, maybe 30 pounds a man. They were giving up 50, 75 pounds a man to Bloom Carroll. And Bloom Carroll set the tone early and tested Tip, and it was not that Tip ever gave up in that game. I have come to realize something that is very important in football that I never really paid much credence to, and that is who wins the coin toss. I've seen Tippecanoe get the benefit of that final possession of the half, first possession of the second half a couple times here in the postseason. And Friday night, that came back to bite them. Just the way the game was unfolding, you could tell Bloom Carroll was going to get the final possession of the half, and then we're going to get the football to start the third quarter. And that was going to be a problem because Tip was down 14-6 at the time. And my fear was that the next time they touched the football, they'd be down 28-6. And that's exactly what happened. Tip against Western Brown and again against Hamilton Baden won the end of the half and won the start of the third quarter. So I think in games like we have coming up this weekend, where they appear to be on paper very evenly matched, particularly Kirtland and Marion, I think it bears watching how the end of the half unfolds and who gets that ball to start the third quarter and what they do at the end of the half, either defensively or offensively, and what they're able to do at the start of the third quarter, because that can really make a big difference. But it was a great year for Matt Burbacher and Tip, which got to the state semifinals despite returning only 3 starters: linebacker Josh Dietz, quarterback Liam Peronsky, and kicker Jackson Cleather. That's an amazing accomplishment to advance farther than any team in Tippecanoe history. Matt Burbacher has a lot of pride in the Tippecanoe community, having played for his father, Charlie, there. And I just want to say it was a great, great pleasure to be a small part of their tournament run, being able to chronicle that. I hope those kids enjoyed our coverage of them, because I certainly enjoyed watching them play and watching them win 2 amazing playoff games over Western Brown and over Hamilton Baden.
Before we get out of here, I want to take a moment too and thank some people who helped make our job a little easier, a lot easier. In fact, on Friday nights, and I know you'll concur with this, guys like Chris Crone, Chris Crone at Coldwater, Bruce Monon at Minster, Bob Winning at Marion Local for the statistical help that they give us throughout the year, and anything you need to know, give those 3 guys a ring and ask them, and they've always got the information there, and they make our job a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable on Friday night, and we appreciate them. We don't always get an opportunity to point those people out. They are kind of the unsung heroes of those programs for the information and the historical data that they compile over the years if you need to know something about Coldwater football or Marion football. But we certainly appreciate all the people. There's more of them than just the 3 that we named. But at all the schools that, volunteer their services and their help and their materials, certainly Tip City, as you mentioned, has always been a great place to go. Anytime you need something, call Charlie, call Matt, call Craig Kramer, their athletic director there. And, the kind of help we've had this year with the athletic directors at all the different schools we've gone to has just been outstanding. And we value those relationships. And guys and gals, want you to know that we appreciate you far, far more than maybe you anticipate or believe. It's kind of cliche to say we couldn't do it without you, but the fact of the matter is we couldn't do it without you.
That is correct. That is correct. Well, if you have nothing else in the Reader Speaks.
And I don't.
Okay. Well, we thank everybody for watching. Encourage your friends around the state to watch this show on replay. It'll be posted on our Twitter pages and on our Facebook page. Follow us on Instagram at Press Pros Magazine.
All right.
Follow us on Twitter at Press Pros Mag. Make sure you build in time to stop at Lehman's Hardware and Old Time General Store just off Route 30 on your way to Canton. You will not regret it, and you will love the cafe. You will love the fudge, the candy, the different sections in the store. Love to hear your feedback on Lehman's next Monday. Hopefully we will be talking about multiple state championships as we have certainly grown accustomed covering the MAC and the other Press Pros area teams. But we are looking forward to a phenomenal weekend in Canton. It is one of our favorite weekends, if not our favorite weekend of the year. And we thank all of you for watching our preview show here tonight. And that is all we have for you, as I thought Mr. Folks was going to wish you a good night, but he just checked out. So with that, have a great evening, and we'll see you again next Monday here on the PressProsMagazine.com Huddle Show.